Well, welcome to the Ocean Studio here as part of the YAHOWAH blog. I am your host, Craig Winn, and we have here this handsome fellow. He is the Wookiee, and we're delighted to be outdoors and streaming live to you. Return to our series on The Voice. It is part of a collection of books called Coming Home. They feature typically Dode's Mizmor, although we're going to begin this one where we left off in our previous episode of The Voice Coming Home, because we're going to reprise what we had shared thus far in the book of Jeremiah. And so it begins with a woe. And when you hear a woe from an inspired prophet of Yahweh, you want to take notice. And you want to try to determine who it is that it is addressing. Like one of the most important woes ever written through the prophets is following the 18th chapter of Isaiah, where it speaks of Israel being thinned at the waist, having a terrorist state carved out of its midst to make it indefensible, and that happening in conjunction with the Shabuah harvest, which is on the 11th of June in 2027. It says in the 18th chapter, woe to the nation and the individual that causes this to happen. And that nation and individual is Donald Trump in the United States of America. And so when it says woe, you ought to pay attention because God is not pleased. Now, in this particular case, the woe is directed at shepherds, at Ra'ah, to those who tend for, feed, and shear the flock. Now, there is a Christian term called a pastor that relates directly to this idea. And when it's in a text that was inspired on behalf of God's people, then those shepherds would be their religious leaders. And so God is saying, woe to them. And should it apply to today, and everything God says is true throughout time, so it does, well, those shepherds that Yahweh is telling, you better be careful. I'm giving you this warning. This is a very bad situation. It's directed towards the rabbis. So woe to the shepherds who have led astray and destroyed, causing irreparable damage, abad, who have ruined by misleading others, causing them to die, perishing, so that they cease to exist because they have scattered, they have putz, they have chaotically displaced the flock from my shepherding and nurturing, prophetically declares Yahweh. Are you aware of a religious group within Israel, which would apply to these being the shepherds of Yahweh's flock, who lead the people away from Yahweh by never mentioning his name and not including him by name in their religion? So who might that be that is comprised of Jews who are religious, who try to lead the people in a direction and never, ever speak of Yahweh or acknowledge that the flock belongs to Yahweh? I think we're talking about rabbis again, aren't we? Because there's no mention of Yahweh in their Babylonian Talmud, which is the very essence of Judaism. God is condemning rabbis and Judaism. There's a reason that rabbis and the practitioners of Judaism don't much like the prophets, but they claim to love the Torah. Oh yeah, Torah. The only reason they like the Torah is because they renamed their Talmud to Torah, because they actually hate the Torah. They despise it. Why? Because if you read the Torah, it becomes immediately obvious that God despises religion. And there's no religions that he despises more than religions among his people. Read the story of the Exodus. The whole thing is a condemnation of the people's propensity to be religious and of their tendency to constantly harass Moshe and reject Yahowah. You can't study the Torah and not know that to negate the value of Yahweh's name is an unforgettable crime. Unforgivable. But the Torah says. And it's emphatic. These false shepherds, they are, in fact, rabbis. So consequently, this is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, what's that name again? Yahweh, the God of Israel. Why can't anyone in Israel say it? They just won't say it. They would rather die than have to say Yahweh's name. I swear it's true. They would. They'd rather die than say Yahweh's name. It is exactly as we read in Devarim 18, where Moshe recounts the story. In fact, it's actually Yahweh recounting the story through Moshe, where the children of Israel told Yahweh, to go away and to shut up. They never wanted to hear from him or see him again. And they actually said, or lest we die. And they have taken that to the full extreme. A Jew would rather die than say Yahweh's name. And the fact of the matter is, while Israel is in denial of Yahweh's name, there is no hope for Israel. The next 8 years are going to be literally hell on earth. They're going to be far worse than anything experienced even during the Holocaust. That's how bad it's going to be. And the only solution is to return to Yahweh. Simple. Return to Yahweh, you will be spared. Don't return to Yahweh, and you will be fortunate if you're one of that final remaining remnant who in the very end decides not to be religious anymore and is at least salvageable. But Yahweh is the God of Israel. There is no other. There is no Hashem of Israel. There is no G-D of Israel. There is no Adonai of Israel. There is a Yahweh. He told Moshe his name. He said that's the only name he ever wants to be called in all places for all time. It is his one and only name. To erase his name is so repulsive, Israel. It really is. And the fact is, you're even obnoxious about it. You changed your own name to hide his name. No mention of a Jew anywhere in the Torah. Not one. You can't say that the Torah is Jewish and that there's Jewish law or Jewish holidays or Jewish anything. There's no mention of a Jew in the Torah. None. There wasn't even a Jew on the planet until the 17th century. The term is Yahud, Yahudah, Yahudem. And it is a compound of Yahweh's name and Dod's name. Yahud, Yahowah, and Dod. But you've erased it. And yet you'll screw around and you'll have a suicidal prime minister called Netanyahu. Where do you think you got that name? This is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, has to say in opposition to those acting as shepherds. This is to the rabbis. Those leading, feeding, and shearing. My people, you yourselves have led astray, pushed away, and you have scattered my flock, and you have constantly driven them away by continually seducing them. You have compelled them. You have enticed them. You have led them astray, and you have lured them and drawn them away, preying upon them. And you have exerted enormous pressures and thereby thrust them aside, exiling them and banishing them from a relationship with me. See, Judaism claims to speak for God, and yet God speaks against Judaism. Now, I'm not saying that Judaism is the worst of the three so-called Abrahamic religions. I think from God's perspective, it is the worst because it preys on his people exclusively. But he clearly hates Islam and Christianity, all three religions. But he's speaking here to rabbis and to Jews. Therefore, you have not been concerned about them, and that's the truth. Rabbis are concerned about their own pockets, about their own prestige. Therefore, you've not been concerned about them. So behold, hold you accountable and will reckon this against you. We are only 8 years away from this final judgment. And those who are rabbis are not going to give up Judaism and come clean and be spared. They will not be among that final remnant. They will not be part of either the Shabuah or Towrah harvest. And so for them, there will be judgment. And because they have received this woe and continued to lead God's people astray, there will be recompense, and that recompense will be eternal exile in Sheol. That is where every rabbi is headed. Spare none. I myself will hold it against you, and I will reckon this against you. I will consider what you have done. This is Yahowah speaking, and I will take it into account, and I will inventory this opposition, retaining a record regarding your accountability, and I will summon it and punish you because of the willful misconduct and the unethical nature of your foolish deeds and wanton abuses. Prophetically declares Yahowah. Jeremiah 23:2. By using Nahum, we know that Yahowah spoke this through the prophet Yirmiyah to people at a different time, at a time of judgment. That time of judgment will follow Towrah. Towrah will take place in year 6000 Yah on the 24th of September. It will begin with the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, and then Eliah is going to conduct a great spectacle over the sacrifice as the body of that bull is waters will be released under him. Yahowah will ignite the fires. It's going to be a grand celebration, 1,000,000 times more extraordinary than what was witnessed 2,888 years prior when Eliah was tasked with denouncing the religious and political establishment of Israel with the same bull being sacrificed. And so with all of this transpiring, it will purge the adulterous woman that is the mortal remnant of Israel at this time. But those who will receive this benefit are anti-religious. And so immediately upon this happening, the religious are going to be judged and they will be condemned. All of them, because of what they have done. Wanton abuses of God's people. So the very people who have claimed that they speak for God are going to be condemned by God. The very people who won't say Yahowah's name are being held accountable by Yahowah. Yahweh continues to speak. He says, "Then I myself will obtain and gather up the remnant, my flock, from all of the lands where I have temporarily scattered them there by name." This is a theme that runs through the prophets. It is most adroitly described in Zechariah, where Yahweh says that there are 4 chariots, 2 of which are specifically for this final remnant of Yisrael. One is black, the other is white. And if you are picked up in the black chariot, it will mean that you're one of the surviving 5 million Jews from various places around the world who have continued to be religious and they're therefore antagonistic towards God and his people. And at that moment, you will be carried off into Sheol, hell. There is also the white chariot that at that moment is going to leave heaven by way and then come down through Jerusalem and then travel around the world. And it will be picking up the Israelites, this mortal remnant, who are apolitical and anti-religious, of whom there is hope to purge so that they're prepared for the return of their Messiah, David, the former and returning king. And they will be in the white chariot and they will be brought back to Jerusalem. If you have a tough time with God doing this in a miraculous fashion, I really don't care. At this point, he is going to be involved in the world miraculously. He's only 10 days away from his return with Dode. And the 2 witnesses will have been there for 3.5 years, speaking to God's people from the Temple Mount. And they're going to be miraculous also in their presentation, and there will be miracles transpiring around them. And so if this bothers you that God is intervening again in these last days, the very last of the last days, then I guess you just won't be among those who are going to be joining us. But God does say that he is going to bring those that he has scattered around the earth all together and into Jerusalem. And he's going to do so on Yom Towrah. That's a day that if you're religious, you won't even know about, because you'll be celebrating Rosh Hashanah, the head of the Babylonian year, in anticipation of a day of atonement, which you afflict yourself. So you'll miss the whole thing. Well, you won't miss it. You'll be in the black chariot. It goes on to say, but my desire is to return and restore them at this time. So God's desire, Shub, is to return. And the only way that Yahweh can return to them at this time is for many of them to have Shub return to him. That is the theme that runs through the prophets. God says that I have left you. I have divorced you. You're no longer my children. I am not even going to intervene or speak directly to you again until you Shub. When you Shub, return to me, I'll Shub, return to you. My desire is to return and to restore them at this time, which means that the only way Yahweh can do that is that we are successful and we get either a reasonable number or a tremendous quality of Yehud and Yisraelite to return to Shub, to Yahweh. So my desire is to return and restore them at this time upon their pasture, their abode, and their home. God wants to be in the role of shepherd. That's why you look at God's title. Have you ever looked at it, considered it in the original alphabet in which it was written? It is a Aleph and a Lamed. What is an Aleph? It is a ram. It's a ram's head. And a Lamed, it's a shepherd's staff. God wants to be the shepherd among the sheep. and they will be fruitful, and they will flourish. They might even enjoy a Coca-Cola in the original glass bottle. And they will be fruitful, and they will flourish. Why do you think I took a drink and just paused there? Do you know? How about their keeper of the cables back hiding there? And they will be fruitful and they will flourish. This is after Yahweh says, I'm bringing them back to their home and to their pasture. I am restoring them. And they're going to Torah.
Flourish, grow.
They're going to Torah. I am the Torah. That's why I paused there. I told you there's going to be a sacrifice, and that sacrifice was going to purge the adulterous woman of Israel. The sacrifice is of a parah. A parah is a fruitful and productive bull. Par being bull, and with the AH ending, you can either render it as heifer, or you can render it as, say, that bull is productive, fruitful. And in this case, the parah is on duty, and it is the parah that is responsible for making it possible for Yahweh to return and to shepherd his flock. It is the final sacrifice during the Mikra, and it is performed on Towrah in year 6000 Yah. It is interesting that in this case, it is the Torahless one who is going to be the belligerent that strikes the Adamah Parah, this bloody red bull who is so productive. And in this regard, it is a reprisal of what happened 2,000 years prior to that with Dod, where it was the ultimate beast, the beast of Rome, that whipped him and then crucified Dod to David in fulfilling Pesach, Passover. And here now in fulfilling Towrah, the bull. It was the lamb back on Passover. That was what Dod represented. His Bashar body represented the lamb, the Passover lamb. And in this case, the Bashar body will be that representing a bull, still a man, who's going to offer his life. He'll be taken by the beast that is re-representing Rome. As a matter of fact, this beast has a name. It's Donald Trump. He is demon-possessed even as we speak. And he is the one who is going to proclaim that he is a god. And he's going to do so on the Ides of March, the great Roman holiday. And the person most active in speaking against him will be this bull, Yada. And he will ultimately allow the one that Satan has possessed to strike him down on Towrah, just as David allowed the Romans to strike him down on Pesach to fulfill Passover, this time filling the promise of Towrah. That is why it is so important that parah was used here. And just as the flock is not lambs, but people, this parah is signified by a bull, but he is a man. And as a result, God went on to say they will increase and become great, living a long and abundant life, Rabbah. It's kind of a funny thing for Yahweh to say. With the rabbis gone, the real rabbis stole this title for themselves. It doesn't mean teacher, it means they're great. So they chose a word in Hebrew that means great, and they applied it to themselves to imply that they were great. And Yahweh said, no, you're gone now, but I've sent you off to Sheol. But it's the remnant of my people that have benefit from the sacrifice of the parah, who I am making great. And they're going to live long and abundant lives. Now, by long and abundant lives, this mortal remnant who is spared on Towrah by the Adamah Parah, they are not immortal, at least not yet. But they will live throughout the entirety of the 1,000-year celebration of Sukkah, when the earth returns to the conditions found in Eden. And during that time, they will have the opportunity to understand the terms and conditions of the covenant and what Dod David did in fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, such that they too can become immortal. And when they do, they will be even greater, and they will live forever. That was Jeremiah 23:3. Yahweh was speaking in first person here, and he continues, "Then I will raise up and establish Kum. I will take a stand on their behalf, and I will confirm and fulfill my promise to honor them over those who serve as shepherds, so that they will do what is required to nurture, guide, and protect them. And they will not be afraid ever again." And so again, God's having fun with words. And what he is saying here is that he is going to make those that the rabbis sought to control and abuse for their self-aggrandizement and pocketbooks. He's going to have the beneficiaries of the sacrifice of the red heifer become far more empowered, enriched. They're going to rise while the rabbis fall. And they will never again cower. They will never again be intimidated. Rabbis play very, very nasty. If you were a Jew and you walk away from Judaism, they are aggressive. They would just as soon trash and burn down your house and destroy your lives. They are exceedingly aggressive in this regard. And God said, you won't have any reason to fear them, not ever again. And they will not be dismayed or discouraged. And understand this is taking place at the very end of the time of Jacob's troubles, which is going to be a 2,300 day period of anguish, worse than the Holocaust, worse than any one of the 3 Roman assaults on Israel or on Judea. But they will never be discouraged again. This is after what will have been 1,000 times worse variation of Alaska flood. But it's all over. Happily ever after begins. They will no longer be discounted or disregarded. They will not be inventoried as merchandise as a result of being considered unimportant. You know, the whole mantra now that is being promoted by Muslims and Marxists that Jews are expendable. Kill them all. They only care about this mythical notion of a fake Justinian. And so be it if all Jews die in the process. They actually think that is enlightened. It's astonishing how dumb Marxism and Islam, how grossly immoral the political doctrine and the religion have made billions of people today. Well, this was prophetically declared by Yahowah and recorded in Jeremiah 23:4. Again, there's a difference between things of Yahowah and things of man. If you read the Talmud, you are never going to say, "Thus says Yahowah." You're going to read, "Thus says so-and-so" as a rabbi. If you read the Quran, it's a jumbled mess of we and me and I and him and gods by all manner of different names, but never Yahowah. And there is no place anywhere in the Christian New Testament where Yahweh speaks in first person under his own name. That is what's happening here. Yahweh is speaking in first person in his own name through the prophet Yirmiah. This is one of the things, too, that I want you to have an appreciation of. You might think what a great honor it would be to be like Yirmiah and to be a prophet and to have God speak through you. I want you to know that in this particular case, that Yirmiah is being used as a set of ears and as a hand to write this down. And Debadim, Moshe is being used as a mouth to form the words. That really isn't the way that God would most prefer to work with us. He would most prefer to have us learn from him over time, come to assimilate the information such that we can make the necessary connections to understand, and then to share what we have learned. That is a much more collaborative process, something that you would prefer to do with a child rather than to use them as a ventriloquist would use a dummy. I'm not demeaning Yirmiah here. Yirmiah does have moments where he expresses himself, which is something that God would likes. But since the children of Israel told Yahweh to go away and shut up, and they never wanted to see him or hear from him again, the only way that Yahweh could speak to them is through prophets like Yirmiah. And that is what we're listening to here. And he says, now pay attention. The days are coming, prophetically declares Yahweh. What was that name again? Oh, Yahweh. You familiar with a God named Yahweh? Oh, yeah. He is the creator God of the universe, the author of life. Yeah. He is the God that was replaced in Christianity and in Judaism and in Islam. What do you think God thinks about being replaced? Anyway, this is what Yahweh says. When I will take a stand by raising up and establishing through the approach of, here's the name of names, the only name that rivals Yahweh's in importance. I will rise up and I will take a stand through the approach of Dod, the beloved, which is errantly transliterated as David, but there is no V in the Torah prophets, not in the alphabet of the Torah prophets. It's a Wah, it makes the O sound, it's a vowel. The name was written, Daleth, Wah, Daleth. Pronounced Dod. It is a fairly common word in Hebrew. It means beloved. You should know it because it's half of Yahud, Yahweh, and Dod, Yahud. What Yahweh just said here ought to shake everyone to the core. It has been available to read for 2,700 years, and it should shake everyone to the core. It says two things here which are essential for you to know. And it begins with Henna. Behold, now pay attention. The days are coming. There is a time in the future. Prophetically declares Yahweh, not Jesus, not Hashem, not Allah, not the Lord. Prophetically declares Yahweh. There are days that are coming, prophetically declares Yahweh, when I will take a stand by raising up and establishing through the approach of Dod. So who's the returning king? Dod. Who's the returning Messiah? Dod. Who is the chosen one? Dod. Who is the Savior? Dowd. So, Dowd, David, had lived 70 years in his first of 3 lives. He passed away 4 years prior to year 3000 Yah. And in year 3000 Yah, the cornerstone of the house for Yahweh's name was placed on the Temple Mount that he had acquired, and Yahweh revealed the 89th Mizmor, his song to his son. All in year 1000 Yah, 968 BCE. So if Dowd is coming back, that he is going to be the one through whom in future days that Yahweh establishes. This was written in the 7th century BCE, so 300 years after Dowd's first life. Doesn't that mean that at the very least Dowd has 2 lives? Doesn't that what that means? That Dowd's coming back. He's going to take a stand by raising up and establishing through the approach of Dowd. It means absolutely, unequivocally, that Dowd has at least a second life. Now, you have to wonder now, which, we're going to find out, but is this mean that Dowd is being risen up and taking a stand by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, Makotim in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah? Because that is what he will reveal himself as the Messiah, as Gabriel through Daniel in the 9th chapter. He will tell us exactly when he is going to fulfill to the day, 600 years in advance, that he's going to fulfill Chag Matzah. And that is the way that God's people are reestablished. And of course, Dowd is then returning in year 6000 Yah on Yom Kippurim to establish his kingdom and protect his people and bring in this condition that we're reading about, that Yah was telling us about, where his people will never be afraid again, where he's going to bring all of his people back home from where he has scattered them, and he is going to elevate them and enrich them at that time. Dowd is involved in both occurrences, which means now that Dowd has 3 lives. Now, why is that difficult for people to understand? When Christians, they're willing to give Jesus 3 lives. He was supposedly lived before he lived, and then he came, the world's a little baby, and then he was killed. Oh my God, we killed God. No, they didn't kill him there. Well, we can't say the Romans killed him because we are the Roman Catholic Church. Oh yeah, we're going to blame the Jews. The Jews killed him. And then he came back. Well, that would be his 3rd life, right? And then he went away, but he's coming back. That would be his 4th life. Okay, for Jesus to have 4 lives, even though he's a myth, never existed. But David, no, we can't have him having 2 or 3 lives, can we? No, because what did Paul say? Paul said he's dead and buried. Dead and buried, man. In fact, he even went as far as to say Dowd's not even in heaven. Why? Because Satan wants to be God's beloved. He wants to be Dowd. He actually says he wants to be Elyon. Elyon is Dowd. It's God's right hand. The answer is Dowd. I mean, almost any question you want to ask. Did Jesus exist? No. Was there a person who was crucified in 33 CE? And was that person a Messiah? Was that person actually the Son of God? Was that person the chosen one? And did it happen in 33 CE on Passover? Absolutely. Just that person was Dowd. Is the Messiah returning as Judaism attests, as Christianity attests? Absolutely. It's just that it's not Bar Kokhba and it isn't Jesus. It's Dowd. God said it. Why don't you trust him? You believe people who lie, but you don't believe God. Why? You won't even say his name. You won't even pronounce his son's name correctly. It's Dowd. And God goes on to say, I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to approach. I am going to take a stand. I'm going to raise up Dod, who he calls Sadak, the correct and proper, the vindicating Shemach branch. Why would he call him Shadak? Why would Yahweh refer to Dod as Sadak? This is in your, if you're a Twistian, you look it up. It's right there in your Bible. Look it up, read it. It says that he was Sadak. You know what Sadak means? It means right, correct, just, vindicated, justified, acquitting. It's describing Dod as being right about God and being the one who is vindicating and vindicated. What made Dod right about God? Because something that God says a lot about Dod, constantly saying, Dod is Sadak, right? It means that Dod's conclusions about Yahweh as his father, as the creator of the universe, as one who used his name often, particularly in his Mizmor songs, that all that was right. And that Dod recognized the value of the Torah. He wrote the 19th Mizmor saying that the Torah is perfect, it's complete, and that it restores our souls. And then in the 119th Mizmor, Dod wrote 8 stanzas for each of the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, delineating the merits of the Torah. He's the opposite of Paul, who denounced the Torah. He is the opposite of the rabbis who plastered over the Torah with their Talmud. That makes Dod right. And if Dod is right, because he is the Messiah, because he is the Son of God, because he is the Savior, he who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, it means all of the religious are wrong. That's what it means when a Dod is right. It means that the Mizmor that we read that were written by Dod are correct. What does the 22nd Mizmor say? Who was it written by? One of the most important prophecies ever written. It was written by Dod in first person as he presented prophetically how he would be crucified on Passover by being crucified. That he would fulfill Passover by being crucified. Dod's right. He fulfilled Passover by being crucified. Dod's right. The 22nd Mizmor, Dod in first person, explains vividly that he would be crucified fulfilling Passover. Dod's right. What does that mean? It means Jesus is wrong, that there was no Jesus. There was no person named Iesu Christu that was crucified. In 33 CE on Passover, year 4000 Yah, it was Dod David. He's right. He wrote in first person that he would be crucified in the 22nd Mizmor, fulfilling Passover. Yeshaya, Isaiah, and the 53rd chapter explained how the guilt would be laid upon the Lamb of God. In the 9th chapter, we are told that Dod is the son that is being given to us. That's what it means. Now, I'm going to tell you that these are two of the three most important discoveries I have made in my life. I would say that these are two of the three most important discoveries in human history. And they are that Jesus never existed. That's what this means. Dod was right. Dod explains that he is the one who was crucified. Jesus never existed. Number two, Dod is the one, as the Messiah and Son of God, fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. The only other insight, discovery that rivals this is being able to put together the entire timeline from our time in Eden to our return to Eden, with every major step along the way designated by exact time and place, including the date that Yahweh and Dode will return. All of it. The exact day that Dode fulfilled Chag Matzah in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah. Of course, there's also the insights of being the first to reintroduce Yahweh's name to the world after it had been neglected for 2,500 years. The first to explain that God hates religion, that the very people who claim to speak for him are the people God detests most. It's a lot for one life, isn't it? And those are a half a dozen of many, many thousands of insights. It says Dode is correct. That's why he is Sadak. And that's what it means. Now, Dode is called the Shamak, the branch. Yahweh refers to me as a choder, which is a stem off of that branch. He describes the two of us and our relationship together in the fourth day of creation, the greater and lesser luminary. Dode is the greater luminary. He is effectively the sun. Yahweh refers to him as such in the 89th Mizmor. He says he's going to come back as brilliant as the sun in his presence. And he says that the moon will continue to be a sign for the Moed. And in the presentation of the fourth day is the lesser and greater luminaries that are the sign for these Moed throughout time. So we have a relationship together. Dode is the main branch. I am simply a stem off of that branch. Branch from where? I know the answer. Do you know the answer? He is a branch from the tree of life, because he opened the doorway to life by fulfilling Pesach. He is the main branch of the tree of lives, and it's actually lives plural in the Hebrew text. Dode is the one who opened the door to life by fulfilling Pesach. He is the branch. It says, then he will reign as king. Who's the returning king? Why would I even have to ask that question? How come you don't know? How can there be a single Christian in the world when Yahweh says, I'm accomplishing this through Dode, that Dode is right, when the Christian New Testament said he's dead and buried and he's excluded from heaven? And Yahweh says, he's the one coming back that is going to be king. He's the one coming back to restore my people. He is the main branch of the tree of lives. And he will reign as king. There's no room for a Jesus here, because Jesus never existed. Nothing but a crude counterfeit of Dode. It's disgusting what Paul did in 52 CE. And it's even more revolting that rabbis didn't hold him accountable and quote this text and the hundreds upon hundreds of others that prove that Jesus is nothing but a fabrication, a complete and total lie. It is Dode who will reign as king. God just said so. There's only one God. His name is Yahweh. His son is Dode, David. Dode is the Malek, the Malach Malek. He will reign as king of every place, of the entire earth, of the universe. Dode was anointed by Yahweh 3 times for his 3 lives. Dode was called the Son of God 3 times by God himself for his 3 lives. And the 3rd life of Dode is when he returns as our king. not difficult for God. It is our souls that are the reservoir of our attitudes and our attributes. Everything that is Dode, his consciousness, his conscience, his great intellect, all of it, all of the sum of his experiences, his character, are embodied in his nephesh soul. And God can make a nephesh soul immortal, which he did in the case of his beloved son. And he can empower and enrich that soul with enormous energy, so that soul is free to travel through the dimensions and no longer be stuck in the three dimensions of our world, but be liberated in time, and then in the fifth and sixth dimension and enter heaven, which is a 7-dimensional space. And Dode Nefesh has come from the 7th dimension, Shamaim, spiritual realm, to fulfill Pesach Matzon Bakodim. Is there now, and he's going to return from 7 dimensions as our king to rule over the earth during the millennial celebration of Sukkah, when we return to the garden. He will reign as king. Now, because Dode is the only person that Yahowah said he's my Messiah, that he anointed personally, and that he has anointed 3 times, why are Jews looking for an unnamed Messiah? Why don't you know the date that he is returning? I do. October 2nd, 6:22 p.m., sunset in Jerusalem. October 2nd, 2033, or 6,000 Yah. Why don't you know this? Why don't you know that he is your Messiah? Then he will reign as king because he has the insight and desire for understanding. He is Shakal. He has the proper focus and the knowledge from sound instruction and teaching, the intellectual capacity and the cerebral acumen to prudently prosper by teaching that which is proper. When Yahowah chose Dode at 8 years old, you recall what he said? He lectured us. Not usually Yahowah's style, but he did. He lectured us. And what he said is that he passed over the other sons of Yeseh because, well, they may have been closer to daddy. They may have been older and stronger and more handsome. Who knows? And I said, I make choices in the people that I choose based on my criterion, and my criterion is not the same as your criterion. Now, when God said that, what should have been the zeal of every person on earth? Oh, what is it that made Dode so attractive to Yahowah? What about his attitude? What about his attributes? What about his just cognitive abilities, about his linguistic abilities? What was it about his character? What was it about Dode that made him so attractive to Yahowah? And once we come to know that, to the extent that we can, shouldn't we try to emulate those same things? If Dode wrote an ode to the Torah, shouldn't we do the same? If Dode sang Yahowah's praises, sang to his father, used his father's name as Yahowah, shouldn't we do the same? If Dode was right, shouldn't we also strive to be right about God? And here, Dode is Shakal. He's knowledgeable. He's properly instructed. He's intellectual. He has cerebral acumen. He's prudent. Shouldn't we all strive to do that? Doesn't that mean that Dode knew and understood, and therefore he would have had no use whatsoever for faith or belief, and that faith or belief would be counter to and useless to a person who understood, because understanding is infinitely more powerful than knowing, and knowing is infinitely more powerful than is believing. So why does anyone have a faith when you can be like Dowd? It says he will be motivated to act upon and genuinely engage in the mishpat. Mishpat is one of probably 1,000 Hebrew words that is a compound of my or ma as an interrogatory, which tells us to ponder the implications of something. And shafat in this case, so it's shafat, mishpat, shafat is to judge, to exercise good judgment, to make sound decisions. So Dowd, it says here, is going to be motivated to act upon and genuinely engage in the means to exercise good judgment and fairly resolve disputes. Do you know the method that Dowd used to mishpat? He fulfilled Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children. And by doing those things, he made it possible for our souls to be immortal and perfected and adopted, which means enriched and empowered, emancipated and enabled by Yahweh as part of his family, inheriting all that would be appropriate for the sons and daughters of God to receive. Dowd made that possible. Dowd also made it possible for us to exercise good judgment about these things, which means to be properly informed and make a sound decision regarding the means that he himself would use by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and by writing his Mizmor Psalms, and by writing his Mashal word pictures, Proverbs, such that we could make an informed decision about God. And he was actively involved in that. Between the Proverbs and the Psalms, he wrote 100 of them. He was actively engaged in providing the means for us to exercise good judgment and to resolve these disputes between God and man. Doing so, tzedakah. Remember that word, tzedak? This is in the feminine form. Doing so correctly, appropriately, righteously, and justly. Again, Dowd's decisions relative to God and to man were correct. And because he's right, God can use him. Doesn't say that he was good. Tob is good. Doesn't say he was good. It says he was right twice. Being right is the essence of benefiting from Yahweh, being part of his covenant, being allowed into heaven, being enriched and empowered by the Almighty, being someone whom Yahweh could work through. Being Tzedak is the essence of knowing Yahweh, speaking for him, working on his behalf, teaching people what is correct about the covenant and the Moed and the children of Israel and of Yahweh, and of how they should go about exercising good judgment. Tzedak. He did so correctly, appropriately, and justly in the land. Jeremiah 23:5. Now, I know that if you're going back weeks now, the last time we did a program out here in our Ocean studio, that you might say, you went over all of this material previously, and this is not where you left off. You've gone right back and you're covering Jeremiah 23 again. Guilty as charged. That is absolutely correct. And the keeper of the cables just walked out and gave me the 1 hour sign and nodded and said, "Yep, I told you where you left off on the last program, and you went back to Yirmiah 5, 23:5, 1 through 5 already." Yes, I did. And why did I do so? Because this is as important a message as you will ever hear. If you've spent this hour with me, you know that Dode is the Messiah and the Son of God. You know that it was Dode David who was here and crucified in 33 CE. There was year 4000. Yeah, you know that there was no Jesus, and there's nothing to Christianity but a pile of lies. You know that Dode is the returning Messiah and King, God's beloved. You know that God's name is Yahowah. You now know when all of this is going to transpire. It's a lot for an hour, isn't it? It was worth your time, was it not? And even if you've heard it before, isn't reinforcing something that is essential for you to know and share worth an hour of your life? It is the Shabat. After all, isn't this what we should be doing on it? Now remember, this is Yahowah now speaking in first person about his beloved son, Dode, whom he names. And, God does not have Alzheimer's. God's not suffering from dementia. God's not insane. Therefore, if he says he's going to accomplish all of these things from Dode, he knows his son's name. He knows the Messiah's name. He knows the King's name. He didn't have a senior moment and slip up and mean to say that other guy that has a Greek name. He doesn't even have a Greek name because there was no J in the Greek language either. But no, he knows who he's talking about. He's really smart. I mean, Dode's really smart. And Yahowah's infinitely smarter than Dode. In fact, I'm really smart. And I wouldn't ever challenge Yahowah. Well, I did challenge Yahowah once. I told him that I could best the platypus and that given the chance, I would create an even better platypus. My platypus would have feathers and would fly, not just swim and crawl on the ground. My platypus is going to fly, and it's going to be the colors of a parrot. And so I challenged Yahowah. And for that, well, as we were reading through Daniel, where I'm one of the speakers in that account, God got back at me at saying, "Okay, you're a Palmoni then." And since that time, I've been dealing with the realization that it's good fun when you're dealing with someone who is not just brilliant but funny.
Action figures sold separately.
And has a sense of humor. So in his day, Yehudah will be liberated. What was that? Did it say Goyim will be liberated? Did it say a church was going to be liberated? Did it say Christians are going to be liberated? How in the hell, Christian, can you say that your New Testament replaced the Torah, and that you as Goy replaced Jews, and that your church replaced Israel, which is the claims that you have to make to even have any justification whatsoever for stealing the Jewish Messiah and their inheritance? How can you say those things when God is saying in his day, in the last days, when Yahowah brings Dode back as king? Now, this is bringing him back as king. He had already served as king 300 years prior to this. It is bringing him back as king. How can you ever spit in God's face to the extent that you said, nope, he's coming back as Jesus, not Dode? And he's coming back for the Gentile church and Christians? No, he's not. First of all, he isn't. And no, he's not. It's Dode, David, who is the king, who is being brought back. And he's coming back to Yehudah, which is even named after him. Yehudah. Even named after him. And it says it's Yehudah that's going to be Yasha, liberated, saved. It doesn't say that the church is going to be saved. It doesn't say that Gentiles are going to be saved. It doesn't say Christians are going to be saved. It doesn't say Jesus is coming back. It says it's David's coming back as king. And when he does, in that day, Yehudah, the beloved of Yah, are going to be liberated and saved, as well as Yisrael. You can't have replaced Israel. If it's Israel that's being saved, you can't have replaced Jews. If it's Jews who are being saved, you can't have replaced and counterfeited Dode if it's Dode that's returning. Unless you want to make God out to be a liar, which is the essence, by the way, of the 89th Mizmor. It said if you claim otherwise, other than Dode is his son, that Dode is the Messiah, that Dode is the Passover lamb, that Dode is the one who is returning as king, as brilliant as the sun. If you say otherwise, you're calling Yahweh a liar. He said that to us in first person in the 89th Mizmor. Read it. It's Yehudah that will be liberated and saved. And Yisrael, which means it's a compound of Yish, Sarah, El. It means those who engage and endure with God will live and dwell. Shaken will camp out in confidence, expressing their trust and reliance. Oh, we're not going to have any goddamn faith. There will be no belief systems. Somebody says, what do you believe? I don't believe anything. I know. So did Dode. We're going to live. We're going to dwell in confidence. We're going to express our reliance and trust in Father and Son. And Yisrael is going to be restored. They are going to live trusting and relying upon Yahweh and Dode. And Yehudah will be saved. And thus, this is his name, which, as a benefit of the enduring relationship, he will be called. His name, whose name? His name, whose name? Who's the only person that Yahweh's talked about? What is the only name that Yahweh has mentioned here? Dode's. And he has spoken of Dode saving Yehudah and giving Yisrael the opportunity to live confidently, trusting and relying on him and his father. And for that, what will Dode be called? Kara, the basis of the Mikra. You know what the Mikra are? Well, in the plural, Mikra, Pesach, Matzah, Bakorim, all of which Dode fulfilled in 33 CE, exactly as he foretold through Daniel, telling us the exact day that he would complete the fulfillment of Chag Matzah in 33 CE, which is year 4000 Yah. Shabuah, which is the upcoming harvest, 11th of June, 2027. Towrah, this day of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, 24 September, a Shabbat, of course, just as is Shabuah, just as was the fulfillment of Matzah in 33 CE. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shabbat. Such that he will return on Yom Kippurim, and that we will begin the 1,000-year celebration of the Shabbat, of Sukkah on a Shabbat, October 7th, 2033. And as a result of making all of these things happen, and having anointed the mercy seat, the Kipporeth of the Ark of the Covenant, on Kippurim, the day of reconciliations, when Dode arrives with Yahweh as Elyon, all things pertaining to God's right hand, he will be called. Yahweh is our vindication. Yahweh Shadak Anaknu. Yahweh is our vindication. Yisrael, when you can say that, Yehudim, when you can say that, world, When you can say that, and when you know what that means, and when you understand how it was delivered, as Yahweh just explained, through Dod, our Messiah, our King, the very Son of God, when you understand what Sadak means, and that Yahweh is our Sadak, then you will join me and forevermore. When you understand Yahweh Sadak, you will know Dod, you will know Yahweh, you will know the covenant, and you will be right about Yahweh, the covenant, the Mikra, salvation, Yisrael, Yehudah, the Torah, and forevermore. Yahweh is our vindication. Yahweh Sadak Anuka. Yirmiah, Yah, teaches and guides Jeremiah 23:6. And that, my friends, is where we concluded our last program. And this is where we will continue our next. I thank you for listening. I care obviously deeply and passionately about this. It is so essential that you come to be right about Yahweh, about his beloved son Dod, and what they have achieved together so that we can be right with them. I thank you for listening. Good day.